Hey, welcome back to Meet the Middle. Super excited to have Kayla Browne here from Bold, the original founder of Bold. I've followed you for some time. I love your work. I'm a big fan. And so thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's really great to be here, and it's very nice to be inside on this very hot week.
Yeah, it's crazy Stampede week here for all of you that are watching, and we're dealing with this immense heat that we all were waiting for, and now
we
here,
just hate it.
Yeah, we're all just like, oh my God. But yeah, so I'm so stoked because I've followed your work. I've seen the progression of some of the stuff that you've done. But Kayla, tell us a bit about yourself, how you got involved in architecture, and kind of, your journey.
Yeah, so I started on the pursuit to architecture after a failed attempt in business school, and I really did not like it. Anyways, so yeah, I started at business school at U of A, and then I went to U of M, and I did my undergrad and I absolutely loved it. And then I took a break between my undergrad and my master's, and I worked in Edmonton at a firm there called Architecture ATB. And then I actually did my master's in Sydney in Australia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that was super fun. And then I moved to Calgary in 2012 after I graduated from my master's.
Got it.
Yeah.
Where are you from originally?
I'm from a small town called Edson, Alberta, and it's in between Jasper and Edmonton on Highway 16. Born and raised. Yeah.
And then tell us a bit about your work. Like what have you been doing? How have you gotten to where you are? What kind of projects, breadth, scale?
Yeah, so I worked at a lot of different firms when I was training, like to get my license. Is a long path for the listeners who don't know. It's like a super, super long path for interning and then writing your exams and getting registered. So that takes, I don't know, people between 5 to 10 years. Mm-hmm. And so I worked at a number of different firms, like large scale commercial firms, smaller boutique firms. And then I founded Bold in 2019. Actually, it stemmed out of my husband and I building a house and a laneway, just actually south, right behind Business and Pleasure where we're at now. And so, yeah, we bought this like really, 5-year vacant house, tear down, only real good opportunity for redevelopment. And we did a single family home and a laneway on the back. And that was we finished it right at the start of the pandemic, essentially. Like it was like 2019, right before 2020. And so it was a very rewarding experience to do that. And then we sold it and after the pandemic, and it was super awesome. And we actually now we live in Inglewood again. We just bought something a little bit closer to the river that we're also going to self-develop. And yeah, those are, I guess, our self-development projects, my husband and I. But the office itself, like we do a lot of different types of work, typologies. We do restaurant projects, commercial projects. We have experience in transit, large infrastructure projects, which is why I'm here today. We do laneways, single family houses, affordable housing projects, high-end residential. We really don't discriminate. We will touch on, we haven't yet, but we will touch on every typology except for probably not institutional, we don't have the training in schools or hospitals or jails or anything like that, but everything else is of interest to us. And when we get a client or pick a client or one comes to us, we just say, do you see value in the process? And are you willing to engage in the process? And if you say yes, and you just want us to design a doghouse, we'll do it.
Yeah, fair. That's pretty cool. The breadth is always interesting to me in architecture, how some firms can touch and work on such multi-diverse scales and projects. Because for someone who's also done that on the build side, I understand how complex it can get.
Yes.
Especially on the throughput and because you self-develop, you also are getting your hands dirty through the process and understand the risk involved. And so how do you manage to work on, that scale?
Oh, the self-developed scale?
Yeah.
Well, we get really big loans, And for the loan that we got on our first project, we had a really big mortgage to pay during COVID, which we didn't anticipate. And so, we just get big loans. And then we either, sell. In that case, we sold them. But the other project that we're working on in Inglewood is going to be rental. Okay. So we're going to long-term rent that project for ourselves. And again, that's going to be a loan. That's going to be a loan.
Yeah. So walk me through like obviously we're here to talk about middle housing.
Yeah.
You did a laneway. I felt like you were kind of on the pioneer end. Like laneways, Mark and the team over at Studio North have done a lot of laneway stuff, but they're not widely available in the city of Calgary. And so tell me a bit about that journey, and then I want to jump into 99 Problems about how Housing 8-1 and kind of what you're seeing, because I think your take on middle is a little bit different than mine and some of the others, and I kind of want to unpack that a bit. But first, tell me about your process, the laneway process, and what have you taken away from that? I'm sure everyone's called you after your project because it's beautiful.
Thank
I love
you.
it, and tell me a bit about what's happened.
Yeah, what's actually interesting is my business partner Darren. He had one of the first laneways in Calgary.
Okay,
so that's the 1A house on our website. He did a laneway on the back. I think he was like the 5th or something like that. And at the time that he did it, and I guess I did it as well, it was pretty new, particularly to banks. And so they didn't recognize it as like part of the loan or part of the asset. And they did after we got it appraised, but that was a hurdle for sure for like the financing component. So I think we may have actually rolled it into like the mortgage of the house, and then after we got the house appraised, anyways, included the laneway with the overall project value. But that was for sure a hurdle, especially if you want construction financing. And from a city perspective, and I think it was mostly like land use bylaw. Building code was okay because it's just the one primary unit and then the secondary suite at the back. There was not enough, like the land use bylaw wasn't robust enough to cover every single condition that could happen in these sort of laneway applications. So this is a really good example. We had the laneway balcony up to the property line, and so you have to have your garage set back a minimum of 600 mils, and we had that, and then we had the balcony overhang, and that was going to be our front porch for our resident, and we were super excited about it. And the city talked about overlook into the neighbor's backyard, but we were kind of like, well, I mean, the backyard, you have to look at the condition of the backyard anyways in general. It didn't matter. It was like there was overlook, and we're like, okay, so this is very, very important from an urban design perspective. We need this front porch. It's going to be it is the front porch, but it's on the second level. So this is the front porch of all the future laneways, right? And everyone on the street one day when it's built out, this alley that will hopefully be a street, this is where all the neighbors are going to come together. So this is an important urban design move that needs to be incorporated from day one. And we really, really want it. So how can we work with you in order to get it? And they're like, okay, you can just move it 3 feet back. We're like, okay, well, when you're on the second level and you move it 3 feet back, there still is the same overlook. And in either way, there's windows there. So there still is overlook. So it was just a matter of, okay, what's important to you guys for us to satisfy, and what's important to us, and let's find a way to make this work. And so that was a big win for us to get that front porch or balcony on the second floor. And it was used constantly by the tenant who lived there. He used it all the time. He lived there all during COVID. He absolutely loved it. Yeah. It was south-facing. It was perfect. And so that was a win that I hope they've looked at since and allowed.
And I'm assuming that mortgage helper was like a big help for you guys to have someone on your property.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Because it was like you could find, for what we ended up selling the house for, you could have found houses of that value just with a house.
Yes.
But yeah, it's like $2,000 a month in rent or whatever it was. Yeah. I actually think it was less than that because we did some trades like you shovel our sidewalk, or you watch our cat, we'll give you a break on rent type of thing. Yeah.
So I'm curious, like obviously you did that. Yeah. To me, it was early. Yeah. Darren's been at this early. What are you seeing more customers come to you for this type of typology now, like this middle space and even further, with obviously a lot of the new zoning changes? And I guess like what are you seeing as some of the obstacles? We've talked a little bit about finance. We've kind of started to talk a little bit about the construction side of things, but what else what are you hearing from the customers? Because I feel like architects are the first line of like the call. Someone says, I want this. And what are you hearing out there?
Well, we are getting more inquiries. But I have to say, and again, for listeners who don't know, to hire an architect for projects, it is, it's expensive. Like it's more expensive than if you were to get an AT or whomever. And so we don't get as large of the volume as I would think that you would expect.
Some of the other production.
Exactly. So we're a smaller boutique firm, and so we place a really high emphasis on value and quality, and that's very, very important to us. We want to create something that we're proud of and that we feel adds value to the residents in the community. And so that kind of makes us not for everybody, because we really push that, and that's our agenda. And so we have got, we're getting lots of inquiries into middle right now, and laneways as well. We actually just finished one in Crescent Heights, and we're seeing that the residents or the owners, I guess, of these properties are on board, and they're super excited about it. And it's of all scales. It's like, maybe I just want to add 2 laneways on the back of my 50-foot, or maybe I just want to do the 2 towns with a secondary suite. So it's not necessarily the full out, the
4x4.
Exactly. It's not the max density. And like, to be honest, like all lots are absolutely not suited for that.
No.
With this rezoning.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Absolutely
I think that's the thing that most people don't understand. The RCG just allows us to have the flexibility to do different forms. And I think that's the discussion, and why I'm so excited about your work is everyone just goes right to highest and best use, but that's not right for necessarily everybody.
No.
And so I love the idea of like a 3x3 or a 3x1 or a 3x2 or a 2x2. But I think they all are starting to have that same level of complexity. And that's where, for me, the value that you provide is someone not only who can draw, design, you've built these before. And I think that often, that is such a huge value add for me, because
like having paid for them before.
You know what it's like to have the loan and to go through the process and to be stuck. And so, like talk to me about that and how that shows up in your work and kind of what you're seeing again in that middle side.
Yeah. So from a building code perspective, the requirements for your max mid-lot RCG are very, very onerous. And I've worked on projects that before this point in time where we were trying to do something similar, those requirements were not put on the project. Meaning, like, we're seeing sprinklering requirements on the middle unit, sometimes at the garage, and at the suite, above the garage, and non-combustible construction, putting this into like sort of a different section of the code than the smaller scale residential projects. And that really, really increases construction costs for a project, and in some cases makes it very unfeasible for an individual. Say it's an individual homeowner and that they want to do this. It's like, well, yeah, I can't afford to sprinkler. Like, I can afford a non-combustible construction stick frame built house, but I can't afford sprinkler. I can't afford non-combustible construction, or like the complexities from a code perspective to get your architect to figure this out, or hiring a code consultant that can really break the pro forma. And so a little bit about what I'm worried about, especially with the push for affordable housing, is we're starting to see these additional requirements. I mean, firewalls is one that like I'm going to live and die on, I'm sure. I'm sure. Oh my gosh, firewalls. Like, really? Do we need these things? Anyways, and I'm an architect, and I like, I'm questioning the application the application and the interpretation of the code and the requirement for firewalls. So, when you look at a firewall in a stacked town, and it's not 3 stories, but 2 stories with a basement, so whatever, 3 stories, you've got 3 additional pours. That is so expensive. You've got to get the cribbers and the concrete truck in, and they've got to pour it 3 times. And then now you've got thermal bridging issues. So now you have to insulate around it, and your wall's like a foot thick. So you've made the interior spaces smaller, which decreases the quality of the units and overall makes the entire project a lot more expensive. And then they might not be, it can't be an affordable project anymore. And so now it's market housing, which is fine. That's totally fine. But if we're making this push for affordable, I'm just worried that the requirements for all of all these code requirements for these smaller middle housing projects are just going to push it to the point where they're not going to be able to be affordable.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's kind of why we created Middle, and that's a bit of my frustration. And sometimes I feel like, am I being authentic about this? Will I actually be able to do this? Because for us, Middle was about like, can we empower homeowners to take control of their own destiny and be part of the project and get this done?
Yeah.
But in order to do that, we need to have predictability. We need to have an understanding of how to deliver these things. And when the professionals like yourself are saying, this is getting very, very complex, I'm like, ugh, how can I actually tell someone that they're going to be able to do this? And so, I think for us, like one of the things I'm excited about what your work is doing is not only are you in the field practicing and building, you're also creating advocacy. So I wanted to talk about the 99 problems, but housing ain't one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Tell us a bit about that.
99 Problems is a lecture that we co-created with XYC Design, and it's came out of the work integrated learning studio that we taught at the University of Calgary School of Architecture, where we focused on the future of market-driven affordable housing, which is like a term that we're finding a lot of people don't really.
Yeah, what is that?
Okay, so market-driven affordable housing, it's got to focus on middle-income housing, and what we're talking about is leaning into the strengths of the private sector, leaning into the strengths of the public sector, and then considering those two groups at the table, working together, how can we deliver affordable housing? So what incentives can we provide, or what support can we provide the private industry who knows how to build and they know how to build fast to bring these units to market?
Yeah.
And, anyways. I'll just talk about what we talked about. We talked about 4 different scales. So we had invisible density, gentle density, discernible density, and intense density. And so we took case studies of all of those scales and talked about hypothetical and real projects. Like we had, our laneways in the invisible density section to show how you can bring these units to market, how they could potentially look, and what could be the ways that the private sector could partner or be incentivized from the public sector in order to bring these projects or projects like these to market. So the 2 larger scales were hypothetical. They were at a much, much larger scale, but the 2, like the invisible and the gentle, both had case studies of projects of ours in them. Yeah. And it was great. We gave a lecture on it, and we have given it since to a lot of different groups at the city of Calgary and the town of Cochrane.
I'd love for you to I don't know if you'd be open to sharing it, but it'd be great to share it. Like, I don't know what you have it, but I'd love to throw it out there for folks so they could take a look at some of the stuff we're talking about.
We don't even have it anywhere right now. We're still we want to try to get another public lecture because people want to hear it. We're actually, we are going to be at BuildX presenting the entire lecture in October.
Okay.
So we will be there, but we're trying to get another one in September, hopefully at the University of Calgary.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. No, I love that. Talk to me about, because I've struggled with this in my life. I'm married to an architect. My wife also worked at Sturgis. I've known Jeremy for a long time, and Kevin and the whole team.
Yeah.
I'm passionate about design.
Yeah.
I started my career trying to work with great architects because I was really like, I want to deliver meaningful work. And oftentimes it doesn't land anyways with communities because what I think is meaningful might not be meaningful to everybody.
To everyone. Yeah.
But I think the thing that I always struggle with is like you started with that conversation is we're not for everybody. We can be more expensive. And so how do we actually tell community members that we can cities, people, that we can deliver high quality product, but hitting a rate that is affordable? Like, how do you bridge that gap? Because I feel like I don't have a solution. Like every time I try to design something that's great, that I'm proud of, it generally costs more. And so talk to me about how you've bridged this gap, or is it unbridgeable? And are we at 2 different points?
Yeah, well, I can talk a little bit about our project and the things that we've done that we are, for the project we're self-developing. However, I'm hiring myself, so it's my time. So I can put in as much time as I want. But we're doing things like for our pro forma to work, for example, we've got to use vinyl siding. Okay, that's fine. Let's go. Let's use vinyl siding. Like it's going to be an affordable project. So let's use vinyl siding, but let's find a way to detail it nicely. Let's use pre-finished aluminum flashing colors, and let's just do that. And let's make sure those match with like the off-the-shelf downspouts. And like we're using affordable materials, but in creative ways in order for us to keep costs down, but still make the project interesting. Another thing that we're really excited about, and we hope that this could be a tool that can maybe help with design, is we created this design tool based on this project, and it's called Architecture Soup. And it's really cool. So basically, what we did is we categorize kind of all the building elements and all the things that we saw on the street of the project. And we notice a lot of commonalities between developments and a lot of differences. And so the things we saw over and over again were like, okay, so these are the staples. These are the character staples of the neighborhood. And this is, they live in this bucket over here. And then we saw a bunch of interesting, like one-off unique things on one or two houses. And we have called those character anomalies. And so we're like, okay, this is what makes up this community or this street. It's like the subject case is like the street. So this is what makes up this street. And so in order for the design to be accepted and the community to get on board, they obviously have deemed all of these things that are built as acceptable built form solutions. So why not start the design there? So we have the staples and we have the anomalies in each of their bowls, and we take a scoop of each one. You get them, you take that and you apply it to the architecture on your project. And we actually did this. So we actually did this, and we had a bunch of really bad ones, like very bad ones. So we had like a design power hour, and everyone in our office like went away and sketched and came up with ideas. We had, 2 or 3 promising ones, and we progressed them forward into 3D modeling, and then we selected one. And that's the one that we're actually going forward with. And all of the elements are derived from what we see on the street. And while it took a while to develop the tool, we actually think it could be very useful to use that as a design tool to integrate middle housing into existing neighborhoods. And for us, like that will, going forward, be a tool that we will utilize. And I think it's going to save us a lot of time in the schematic design phase. So that's one way that you could, provide high quality design solutions that we feel the community is going to get behind, but potentially not cost a lot of money going through like umpteen design iterations. It's like, okay, they're predetermined, and let's use that and let's go. But the detailing is important. So thoughtfulness and consideration in the detailing doesn't have to be expensive materials, but just like taking the time to consider everything is important.
Yeah, getting the front end right has been one of my experiences.
Yes.
No question. It's like pay early, pay up front, get as much as you can on paper.
Yes.
Creates higher chances of success. So I love that. I think for me, the one thing I'll just leave you with, because I love the idea of community contexts.
Yeah.
What I also love though is like when architects also break the mold, right? So it's a bit of a balance. I think it's when you insert yourselves, like I think the project that you guys have done in Inglewood is such a good example of that, because I felt you took exactly what you did is what I get from that project is there's these industrial components, but it still meets the street very softly. And I love like how it fits, but it also kind of brings us into this new place. And for me, that's what I've always loved about established neighbor areas. Like you can actually see the evolution of housing change, and it all stays within the fabric. And so that's the only piece I'll leave you with. I do have one more question for you. And before we jump off here, heritage. Talk to me about heritage preservation.
Okay.
What is heritage? How do you deem heritage? Because I know that you're passionate about this. I've seen some of the stuff you've said. I've always struggled with heritage, the concept of retaining certain built forms or not. And how do you take that approach as a professional?
Well, heritage is a designation, right? If we're talking like actual definition of heritage, it's either municipally or provincially, sometimes federally designated. And I do have a lot of respect for that and the retention of that and interventions within. And I also think that heritage, not everything is heritage. Okay, so not everything is heritage. And just because something has been there a long time doesn't mean that it's heritage. The house that we did tear down was from 1901. And I'm sure some people considered it historic or heritage on the street. But at that point, it had been vacant for 5 years and it wasn't adding anything to the community. I actually think it was taking away. So we looked at that as an opportunity and a revitalization and paying respect to what was there before, but adding more value and more like a higher quality to the street than what that house was providing. And so I do have a lot of respect for heritage assets and the retention of them. And I also think they're a really important part of our history. And so some buildings that are not necessarily considered heritage, we have a few brutalist buildings in Calgary. I don't believe they're considered heritage, but they're very, very important. You know, brutalism was the shortest movement, but I believe it had the widest span in terms of touch in the world. And so it's all over short movement, but that's important. It's an important piece of history for us. And I think that if something isn't deemed heritage, but it's significant and it's been there for a long time, we should be looking at it with a lens that, like, look at it beyond just the fact that it is vacant and look at it like, where did this exist within, you know, the country and the architecture movements at large? Or is there a way that we can retrofit this in some way that it can become something more meaningful to the community because it has significant architectural meaning, that type of thing. So I don't know, like
No, it's good.
Yeah.
It's a good way to frame it. And I'm not a study professional, so I'm always curious how folks who have been in this field for a long time, have got the history, have been through it. You talked a bit about brutalism. Like, my dream is to live in a brutalist building one day. Like, I absolutely love that time frame, just because the rawness of the materials and the quality is always front and center. And I've always been such a big fan of that. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. We look forward to hopefully catching a 99 and hopefully you'll join our middle community and start sharing some of the stuff you're working on, because I think it's super powerful. So
thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks.